Welcome to Petty Revenge, and on this channel we'll explore unique and intriguing everyday stories together. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for the latest stories. Let's enjoy some exciting moments and connect on Petty Revenge. Story 1. A painful relationship. Nikita and Ksenia have been together for 5 years. The husband had recently been promoted. He worked a lot of hours and often went on small business trips. The wife did not like the fact that they spent so little time together. Yes, these trips paid good money for their town, but what kind of attitude was it when the spouses spent most of their time apart? She really missed her husband's attention, and sometimes he was so tired that he was exhausted. There was no time to talk about life and how anyone's day was going. Around this time, Ksenia had a new coworker via Chislav at work, a young man full of strength and energy. Immediately began to show interest in the woman. Not working or even friendly, she had already forgotten what it was like when a man wooed her, and she was pleased to receive such attention from him, but she did not allow herself too much with him. She was a married woman after all. They talked and got to know each other for several months. Chislav turned out to be a very interesting and deep person. They started to communicate more and more on social networks, and the subjects of their conversations became more and more personal and even intimate. Another business trip of the husband began. Ksenia was sitting at home on her day off and was frankly bored with nothing to do. She began to correspond with Chislav, who always managed to cheer her up somehow. When she complained to him about the incredible boredom, he invited her to go together to the movies, just in the rental of an interesting comedy that should cheer her up. "Shall we go?" he asked her. The woman didn't answer his message for a long time, thinking about how it would look from the outside. She's a married woman going to the movies with some other man. It seems kind of uncool, but they are being friendly. Finally, she agreed to Chislav's invitation. The man behaved like a gentleman during the whole meeting, not overstepping the boundaries of the permitted. After the movie, they walked around the park for a while, and then Chislav offered to take Ksenia home. It was getting late when they arrived at the right house. The man half-jokingly asked if she would like to invite him over for tea. She agreed out of hospitality. That was her mistake. When the woman had already put the kettle on and started offering different kinds of tea to choose from, Chislav spotted a bottle of wine on one of the shelves. To him, it was such a wonderful evening. "Let's end it on a good note and drink wine," he suggested, smiling slyly. After a few glasses and not at all friendly conversation, the man began to shower the woman with compliments and even embraced her. He talked about how beautiful she was, how much he had fallen in love with her at first sight, how much he had been looking forward to meeting her. At one point, Ksenia's heart even tingled. She missed these words from her husband, who was just gone for days at work. From the alcohol she drank and the words she heard, the woman melted, and after a short time she stopped thinking about her husband and what she was doing that evening. Everything happened right in the couple's apartment. In the morning, Ksenia woke up and saw that she was not alone in bed and with horror grabbed her head. What she had done, how she could do this to her husband? She'd been sitting in the kitchen for a long time, staring at one point when Chislav finally woke up and came to her. But instead of a kiss and a good morning, she unexpectedly heard that all last night. Ksenia considered it a mistake. She was very sorry that all this had happened. "You just tell your husband about it and go to my place," the man said, sincerely not understanding what could have changed overnight. "No, I can't just go, please," she replied. For the next 2 weeks, Ksenia nullified all communication with her colleague. She felt terribly guilty before her husband and only now realized how good and dear he was to her. When Nikita returned from a business trip, she just could not be happy with him. She became more attentive to her husband, constantly talking to him about her love. She decided that she would never admit to cheating on him. She knew that it would cause Nikita incredible pain. But that was no longer for her to decide. One day, Ksenia came home from work and found her spouse in the kitchen. In front of him was a shot glass and a large stack of some papers. Her wife immediately sensed something bad. Her heart began to beat anxiously. At first, she thought it might be work-related, but when she got closer, she saw that it was her printed correspondence with her colleague. And like the cherry on top of the cake, on the pile was a printed photo. On it, she was a half-naked Ksenia sleeping peacefully in bed, just the night she cheated on her spouse. A colleague could not bear such an attitude from Ksenia, so he decided to tell her husband everything. It is difficult to convey what Nikita felt at that moment when he saw a large envelope on the doorstep of his apartment. He was surprised, not expecting a parcel from anyone. He opened it with curiosity, but when he opened it, and the first thing he took out was the printed photo of his wife, the ground almost fell out from under his feet. He quickly went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and took out the entire contents of the envelope, and there were a considerable number of sheets. Already on the third page, he could not read any further. He took a bottle of strong alcohol out of the cabinet. When he had already finished reading all the correspondence between his wife and her lover, she came home and found her husband there. He said practically nothing. His wife tried to explain herself and ask for forgiveness. It was as if Nikita wasn't even listening to her. His mind was spinning with questions. Why? Why everything was like this? Only when his wife's inappropriate sobs became completely unbearable, he said in a very gloomy voice, "Pack your things and just leave now. I have nothing more to talk about." Xenia fell silent and with a tearful face went to get her suitcase. For a few days, the man did not dry out and thought a lot about this situation. Then he realized that this way he did not help anything. The marriage was ruined. He was not ready to forgive his spouse now, and it is unlikely he ever will. So he filed for divorce. Xenia had enough sense not to claim what rightfully belonged to her. She generally carefully avoided the company of a cheating spouse. Nikita did not take revenge on Xenia. He considered revenge to be a miserable, unworthy waste of precious time. In any case, she was going to live with the fact that she was an unfaithful wife, and the relationship that haunted her was bound to come out. And who would need her with such a track record? A big question. Story 2, a complicated affair. When I was still in my first year of college, in the summer I was sent to visit my Aunt Galia, my mother's sister, at her dacha. Although, as one friend of mine would put it, it was exactly a country house. To make a long story short, Galia, or Galina Ivanova, was a woman who was a pretty walker but very beautiful, slender legs, thin waist, and no wrinkles at all. Well, Auntie was also a blonde with a short haircut, which I liked even more. When such a beautiful woman lived next to me, walking with peace of mind was not an option. I often heard stories about her taking strange men into her house. One day, I decided to take a steam bath in the evening. I flooded the sauna and immersed myself in my thoughts. After a few minutes of thoughts about plans for the future and attempts to solve the integral equation in my mind, aboard me suddenly, I started thinking about Aunt Galia and how good she looked. Fantasies took over. "What are you doing here?" Aunt Galia's voice suddenly rang out. I opened my eyes and saw Galina Ivanovna standing in the door of the bathhouse. I immediately blushed. "You were not taught to knock," I asked in a trembling voice, "and I thought you were well-mannered," she answered quietly, slowly approaching me. "You know, I'm not well-mannered either." I hesitated from such surprise. Aunt Galia was looking at me carefully with some interest, and I began to understand what she was up to. "And you are a very good-looking guy," she said, coming even closer. I immediately looked at my aunt with rounded eyes and wanted to shout something, but I decided it was better to trust her. The kiss alone made me shiver. Imagine how much I tensed up when we went on. It was scary, but then it calmed down, and the process was going great. When it all stopped, my aunt got up, smiled, and left. I was still sitting on the bench, not understanding what had just happened. It felt like a dream or a fleeting thought, but when over time it began to repeat itself over and over again, I realized that this was my most perfect reality. As the years passed, I grew older and saw my aunt much less often. There were new worries, jobs, and other girls. She was jealous of me, even though she had other men of her own. I did not understand what we should do next, whether there was a reasonable way out of this situation. After all, we could not be together. It is already clear. No one would understand us, and many would stop communicating with us. To go to a psychologist with this topic is not possible either. No one will call you normal. All in all, I am confused about how things will work out in my life next. I do not know. Thank you for listening to the story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like, as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you think about the story.